We're going to start this morning a new teaching series, and you can see on the screen the title. We're going to be talking about being a kingdom community and what it means to be a kingdom community and how we live out this life, the way of Jesus. How do we do that together? And that's really what we're going to do. We're going to use the passages from Matthew 5, the chapters from Matthew 5 through to Matthew 7 to base our teaching over the next few months. So if you get an opportunity to read just those 3 chapters and reread them and get used to them, you'll be familiar. If you've been around church for some of your life, you'll probably be a bit familiar with some of this, because in that is the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, but it's a great few chapters, and we're going to be unpacking these chapters over the next few weeks with this sort of title. If you were around HBC last term, you'll know that we did a teaching series where we focused on who God is. And we were talking about the names of God and thinking about his names and how, as we understand his names and his character, it begins to shape us. And we're going to build on that by asking a slightly different question through this teaching series. And the question that we're going to be exploring is, who are we becoming together because of him? Who are we becoming together because of him? Because what we believe about God doesn't just shape our theology. I think it actually shapes our relationships, our culture, and our shared life. And that's really what we're going to explore. Now, I think many of us in the room don't think like this, but maybe some of us do. We can think about church as being like those 2 hours that you spend together on a Sunday. I think over the years here, if you've been around HBC, we've tried to sort of explore that church is much more than 2 hours on a Sunday morning. And what does church look like, and what is church about? And so some of the decisions that we've made as a church particularly over the last 10 years, has helped us to think about the shape of church. And church isn't just about when we gather like this. And lots of us can be thinking that way. We can have a worldview that church is this sort of gathering. And yet it's much more than that. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Many of you will agree with that and will have experienced that church is much more than this gathering on a Sunday morning, even though this gathering is important. Church is about how we are formed on a Monday morning in our conversations at work. Church is about how we relate to one another over shared meals. Church is a little bit about how do we handle disagreements between us in some of the things that we might believe and hold as convictions, and other people might have beliefs and hold different convictions. How do we share that together? How do we release and receive forgiveness between ourselves when somebody hurts us? And if you've been around HBC, you know that I've said this a few times, that if you hang out in HBC for any length of time, there will be a moment in it when you get hurt by someone. Someone will say something or do something that hurts you. And that's part of life. It's part of knowing people. It's part of relationship. The challenge is about, well, then how do we process that? And this is what we're going to be unpacking in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. So this series that we're going to look at is not so much about adding content. I don't want you to think about, we're just going to have more content in our lives, or more knowledge in our lives. That's okay. You know, we need to grow in knowledge. But this teaching series, for me and for us as a leadership, as we've been thinking about it, it's about shaping our culture. Shaping our culture as a church. I don't know if you think about this much. What is the culture of HBC? I think about this a lot. You might wonder, what does Andy do in his job? One of the things that I do is that I feel one of the calls on my life is to set and protect the culture of Hull Baptist Church. And culture is for me the way that we do things around here. And HBC's culture is unique to HBC. Some of you in this room have been in other churches at other times. And that church will have had a different culture. There might be some shared values that we maybe can talk about. But actually, what I want us to talk about and what I want us to dig into is like, how does this teaching, this idea of being a kingdom community, how will it help us shape our culture and to be aware of what that culture looks like? So let's go to Matthew 5 and just read a few verses together. So Matthew 5 starts like this. It says, when he, and the he is Jesus, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, and he goes into the teaching, we'll look at that in a minute, but I want to just take those few verses for a second. The context is that there's loads of people. There's crowds of people, following Jesus, wanting to listen to Jesus. But in that moment, it's his disciples who draw near to Jesus. The crowds are all there watching and maybe listening. But this moment is about his disciples leaning in and drawing closer to the teaching that Jesus is about to give. And I want to encourage you, if you are a disciple of Jesus, and if you feel like HBC particularly is the place that God has put you, then I want you to lean in to this teaching series. I want you to draw near to it. Not just in the context of content, but also in the context of culture and how we live together. In some ways, the teachings of Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are not primarily for the curious observers. They're not really for the crowds. The crowds will be listening and watching and looking on. But this teaching of Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are for the followers of Jesus. Jesus is talking to people who are making decisions to be followers. And it's not about how you enter the kingdom. So don't get too confused here. In terms of entering the kingdom, the way that you enter the kingdom of God is that you enter it by faith. You make a decision to follow Jesus. And maybe even in this context today, part of this new year is about us either renewing our commitment or making that commitment for the first time to follow Jesus. This teaching is about being a follower of Jesus. What does it look like for the kingdom to take root in you as a follower of Jesus? What does it look like for the kingdom of God? What does it look like in your life and in my life? So let's go back to HBC and just have a think for a second about culture, the way we do things around here. Culture can be spoken and unspoken. And I just want you to have a think about three questions. What gets celebrated at HBC? Not looking for answers at the moment, so this is just rhetorical. What gets celebrated? What do you celebrate about HBC? What gets noticed? What do you notice within the life of HBC? And what goes unseen but deeply matters to HBC? Like, sometimes culture is not so much what's said, it's something what you feel, something that you experience as you get to know people. And Jesus here, I think, is intentionally beginning to think about how to form the culture of his community. So we're quite early on in the sort of ministry of Jesus. And so people are starting to make decisions to follow him. And so now he's beginning to say to those individuals, this is the sort of community that I want you to form as you follow me together. There's something about shared life moments that helps us understand some of that community. Those moments where we share life. So for me, some of the examples within HBC that sort of reflect and define some of our culture are things like this. It's about someone quietly caring for someone else through illness. Like they just get on and support that person. They don't make a song and dance about it. They don't wait for somebody to organize that care. They just get on and care. One of the things I love about HBC is what I would call the extent of, what's the word I'm looking for? Organic care. That's not it's like you don't wait for the church to organize the care. It organically happens. And then I find out about it, or the life support team finds out about it. It goes on unspoken. What about groups of people? One of the things about HBC is that there's groups of people who are supporting other groups of people, faithfully praying for them month in and month out. I can think of at least 5 WhatsApp groups that I'm in, where the focus of that WhatsApp group is a person or an individual or a situation that people are praying for because they're in a difficult context. And maybe you are part of that. And some of that will spring out of our missional communities that we're in, or it'll spring out some of the friendship groups that we're in. And as Tony hinted at, one of the advantages of lots of little different WhatsApp groups that we have as a church is that information gets out quite quickly and to lots of people then who then respond in that moment. Just before Christmas, I was talking to Andy Avery. We were talking about he wanted to communicate to the church something that he needed some very practical, I think they were jars for the Messy Church Christmas. And he was like, can we send an email out? I was like, actually, Andy, I think probably the best thing to do is send out some WhatsApp messages. So we did that, and within like 2 hours of the WhatsApp message going out, he had like 50 jars for that service. So, yeah, WhatsApp's blessings and curses, but they do have some good stuff going on. I think the other thing about culture sometimes as well is this sort of faithfulness in service when nobody's applauding. I have the privilege. I look around and can see your faces. So many of you in this room faithfully are serving God without any applause. You turn up on a Saturday morning once a month to do Who Let the Dads Out, or you turn up in another context to serve in trackers or in wildfire or renew well-being, or you go down to the community cafe and you're serving on the community cafe at the Crossroads Community Hub. There's lots of examples across, or somebody wants to organize an event, somebody just organizes it, and so much goes on just organically, which I think reflects something of the character. Let's go back to the passage again, Matthew 5, and let's just read together some verses just together. I'm going to read these quite slowly because this is what's called the Beatitudes. Jesus says this: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. You know, when we hear the Beatitudes, so often we can hear them in a personal way. But actually, Jesus is talking to a community here. He's talking to his disciples. And the Beatitudes work out best and are supposed to be put into practice in that way in a community context. It's quite easy to be a peacemaker if it's just you and God. You know what I mean? Well, maybe it isn't. Sometimes I'm in conflict myself. I don't know about you. But actually, to be a peacemaker, you need other people, don't you? And Jesus isn't here creating spiritual heroes. Again, sometimes we can think about discipleship, we can think about being a disciple as being like an elite form of discipleship, that like an SAS of Christianity. Jesus is talking to everyday followers, you and me. And he's creating a culture, he's creating and shaping a community where, and just a few little thoughts, like poor in spirit. So poor in spirit for me is about humility replacing comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. We all compare ourselves with someone else. And we tend to compare in two ways, don't we? We compare ourselves one way by thinking, well, I'm so glad I'm not like that person because I'm so much better. Or we compare ourselves in another direction, think, oh, I could never be like so-and-so because they're so spiritual. I do that. Do you do that? But don't compare yourself. Just in humility, be who God has called you to be. Those who mourn for me in the context of community is the place where we share pain and carry it together. One of the things that we have to embrace if we're going to do community well is to carry shared pain. And actually as Christians, and if I can say one thing as somebody who's been a pastor for over 30 years now, is do not try and fix something quickly in a context where there's pain. Christians, we love to fix it. And that's because pastorally we know that God can fix everything. But we live in this tension. It's a tension of the kingdom which is now and not yet, where actually part of blessed are those who mourn is the ability to share pain, to carry pain together for a season, and not to rush that through. So actually we want to fix somebody. Because when there's pain in a context, in a relationship, it's so difficult sometimes to handle that pain because that pain then connects into our pain. And we can then trigger ourselves sometimes because the pain connects to a trauma from our past. And that's why we need that level of poor in spirit, that humility. Blessed are the meek. Well, the meek for me means that we make the decision to put down power games. We lay them down. We're not here to try and find power, are we? We're here to follow the example of Jesus. Jesus said he came first of all to seek and to save, to serve before he came. Blessed are those who are merciful. I guess merciful for me means that forgiveness becomes the normative in our community. Again, 30 years of leading HBC, I can think of so many people who've been hurt by me, not intentionally. Hopefully I would never intentionally go out to hurt someone. But sometimes it happens. And therefore we can't process that forgiveness together, and they've left the church. They've left Hull Baptist Church. You could think of people, maybe you know that person, or you know people, not in this church, but in other churches. It's so easy, isn't it? Well, I think it is in my own life. When something happens then, to allow the hurt to shift into what Hebrews talks about, which is the seed of offense, the root of bitterness. When you get offended, that's the most dangerous place I think you can be in as a Christian. And it's so easy to, and I think actually offense is something that you take. You take offense. I think it's Bill Johnson has this phrase, or maybe actually might be Danny Silk, one of the other leaders at Bethel, to have this commitment to live an unoffendable life. I'm going to choose not to be offended. I'm going to choose mercy. And sometimes I've done that, and it's got me into great trouble, if I'm honest with you, because I've tried to choose not to be offended, go the extra mile, to do something, to give a second chance, a third chance. And sometimes that's painful. Blessed are the peacemakers. This is really hard, isn't it? I find this probably one of the most hardest, because I hate conflict. Hate it with a, some people, they don't like conflict, but they can sort of deal with conflict. I guess we have to be really honest in a church culture. If we're trying to shape it, there will be moments of conflict. Let's just accept that truth. The question is not to avoid the conflict, but find a way of facing the conflict. And to work through that conflict as best we can, using these Beatitudes as our starting point. For me, the illustration in all this is like the illustration of a choir. There's something very special, isn't it? It's great to go and hear a soloist, and we can be really impressed by a soloist singing. But actually, when we get a really good choir, which requires that listening and that harmony and that humility, there's something really special about a choir singing together. Some of you might be in choirs. That's one of the reasons why I think choirs are so popular, is that sense of togetherness and expressing it. So we can't live the Beatitudes alone. So I don't know, maybe this is something for you to think about and to talk about in your missional community or with your group of friends. What do you think, out of all those Beatitudes, we most need to grow in together at Hull Baptist Church in 2026? What should we lean into and work at and pray into? Let's go back to the passage and just pick up the reading again. I'm going to pick it up in verse 13. It says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather it puts it on a lampstand, and it gives light for all those in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." One of the joys of Christmas time is lights on people's houses. I don't know whether you are a lights on people's household, and you put lots of lights out around your house. We live at the top end of Hull, and it's great just driving around the little estate there, and every now and again you come across this house that's completely lit up with lights like you can see it from space. And there's so many lights. on their house. And there's that sense, isn't it, that light at this time of year, we're drawn to it because it's so blinking dark. So we want light. Light is really important. And Jesus here is talking about light. Salt and light is community identities. Like, what does it look like for us as a community to be salt and light to one another? I'll just read what I wrote here. I think part of our witness as a church isn't just what we say, what I say or what you say. It's something about the atmosphere that people encounter. Like, I don't know whether you think about this, and it's not just about this morning, but this is a place where people do encounter us for the first time and come and visit HBC. But what's the warmth of welcome that a person gets as they come in? Like, when a person walks in for the first time, do they look around and see everybody in their little conversations with people that they know? Or are people just heads up and looking around for an unfamiliar face to give them a welcome? Have you seen somebody this morning that you don't recognize and you think, oh, maybe I could just go and say hello? Little tip, if there's somebody in the room that you don't know and you haven't recognized, don't go up to them and say, oh, is this your first time at HBC? Because it could be their fourth year and you just haven't spoken to them. The little tip is to say, oh, I don't think we've ever spoken before. I'm Andy, what's your name? You use that. I've done that before in the past where I've said to somebody, is this your first time at HBC? And they're like, I've been coming for about 6 weeks. I'm like, oh, because obviously we do it every week, every other week. So sometimes it's hard to miss and to see people. But what's the warmth of welcome? Are we willing to step out of our usual little circles to notice the newcomer? Is there a level of safety within HBC where people can be honest, where we can sometimes, not hide behind any sort of mask? Now, don't get me wrong, we don't have to come to church or to a community and bare our souls to everybody. But there are those moments, aren't they? And I guess it came out a little bit this morning where a story connects with us, the story that Derry was telling about Peter. And it's okay to get emotional, isn't it, when that story's told? That's just life. Like, it'd be really sad if we were all, like, closed off, wouldn't it, and not willing to sort of allow emotion. And I don't know about your upbringing. I was brought up in a church context as a child. Sue does have photographs of me as a choir boy. And in the choir, we had a group of women, ladies, who were in the choir. And their jobs was to keep the choir boys quiet. They would sit behind us and flick us on the back of our heads. This is in the 1970s, so I do not recommend that in our church. If children are making a noise, do not go and flick them on the back of their head. But there was a few ladies who were like scary lady choir, and I was a choir boy. And we were not particularly good choir boys as well, to be fair. Always trying to eat sweets at the top end of the altar. But how do we feel safe? How can we be honest? So remember that this passage, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. The word you is plural. That word you in English can be a singular word, can't it? Talking about you, or it can be talking about you. This is, in Jesus' language, you. It's a plural you. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Just a few things about salt. Salt preserves, brings flavor. It must be mixed in. Light, it exists to be seen. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Light exists to be seen. Light is no good if you don't see it. Has to be seen. And it works best together. Light, something about light, isn't there? Like we've talked about before. If you just get one candle in a dark room, yes, the light shines. But if you then get 100 candles in a dark room. The light magnifies, it becomes more illuminated. There's something about us working together. Use this illustration a lot in different contexts, but if you take a coal and you've got a coal in a fire and the fire is burning and the coals are all hot, you take the coal out of the fire and put it to one side, it doesn't take long for that coal then to lose its heat and become inefficient in terms of what it's trying to do. It works best, coal does, when it's in the mix of the fire. It's when it's mixed in. So together we stay hot. I want to encourage you in 2026, think about how do you connect in the community that you need to connect in. Where's the community, the smaller community? We've got a larger community. You look around today, it's over 100 of us. We can't do community in a particular way with 100. You can do some things in 100 people, but there's some things that you can only do in a group of 50 or a group of 20. And we need to find different communities. That's part of the missional communities that we do in the way that we have the rhythm of church. So maybe 2026 for some of you in the room, it's like, where's your community? Is it the young adults community? That's where you need to connect in really strongly if you're a young adult. Or is it this particular community? Pause for thought. Is it that community that you need to connect into? Or is it into the Renew Wellbeing space? Is that a community that you could connect into? Find your community and seek it out. Get help. Talk to people. Try out a different community. Because kingdom community has to be visible. So again, just thinking about this community of contrast, thinking about the teaching of Jesus. What Jesus is assuming in this context is that being part of the community, the kingdom community, will feel different from the other communities that you belong to. There's got to be something that feels different about belonging to a church community than, say, belonging to a golfing community or an art community or other communities that you might belong to. They're all good. We need lots of communities, but there should be something very different. Jesus says as well that there will be some times when that community is misunderstood. Sometimes it'll be resisted because the community is challenging in the way that light seeks to expose darkness. There's a phrase in it says, let your light shine. This is, I think about verse 16. Let your light shine so that you may glorify your Father in heaven. So the goal isn't so much to draw attention to ourselves. It's not about creating such a culture that actually, isn't HBC a great church? It's about actually us pointing to Jesus and to God and saying, actually, we want to glorify and reflect who God is. In fact, the best illustration I could think of is that we want to be like a window. A window works best because it doesn't draw attention to itself. It lets the light through it. I love going to David and Judah's house, if you've ever been to their house, when they had it built a few years back, because they've got these huge windows in their sort of welcoming hall. And it lets in so much light. When we did our extension, it was Judith who recommended to us to put extra windows into the extension so we could let light into the room. And there's something, isn't it, about good windows that allow light to pass through. We are a window. We live as windows to this world. I think some of the strongest points of culture for HBC don't come from those big moments that we might think about. And in 2026, I think the big moments of culture for 2026 will be when people choose patience. when people choose forgiveness, when people choose faithfulness, particularly in those moments when it's easy to walk away. It's like, are we willing again? Like, I was thinking about this and yeah, just that whole context, isn't it, of 34 years of like another January comes round. Like, what are we going to choose for 2026 that will reflect this idea of living faithfully to the call of God to be together as a congregation, to work things out. So just as I land this, just for the final few moments, I want to encourage you, as we go through these chapters of chapters 5, 6, and 7, we'll encounter Jesus talking about things like anger, being angry. He'll talk about those situations where you've been really hurt by someone and you need to find a way of forgiving someone. He'll talk about prayer. He'll talk about prayer and talking to God and God talking to you. He'll talk about what it means to live out life where an anxiety can so easily begin to overtake us in the way that we're thinking about stuff. He'll talk about judgment, about not judging one another. He'll talk about obedience. So this series will ask something of you. This series will ask something of you. It's not going to ask of you perfection, but it will ask something about participation. You'll only get something out of this series if you participate, if you decide to step in to this community. And I know some are here visiting, and you'll need to work that out in the context that you're in. But for those of us where this is home, like, what are you going to do to participate in 2026? Jesus isn't just asking us to admire the Sermon on the Mount, and we can do that a little bit with the Sermon on the Mount. And we can sort of admire this amazing teaching of Jesus. But he's not doing that. He's saying to us, I'm going to invite you to live this out together. And I guess this morning, to you and to me, there's that new invitation. That's part of a 2026 new year. It's like an invitation to you and to me to step in to this moment. It's about becoming more together. That together, as we look into 2026, God will create and develop this kingdom community. So let me encourage you to do three things. Stay engaged in the series as much as you can. If you miss a Sunday, then listen to it. Listen to the sermon on Spotify or on the YouTube channel of HBC. Engage with it. Take a few minutes to listen and catch up with it if you miss it on a Sunday. Stay engaged in the series. Get connected and stay connected to a community, a smaller community. Find the people that are your community. And if you need help to do that, then we'll help you do that. Some people will do that really naturally and they'll find their place. But if you're struggling, you're not quite sure where you connect, then please talk to somebody on the leadership of the church and just chat to us and make sure you've got a community, people that you are connected to. And then finally, let's all stay open to change. Yeah? Let's be willing to embrace more change. Openness to change in 2026. Where does God 2026? I'm thinking of 2006 then for some reason. That's what went into my head. Anyway, let's pray. Let's get the worship team back up, and let's just take a little bit of time to respond. I'm gonna pray as we go into a time of worship. But why don't we just take a moment of stillness before we sing any more songs or say any more words? Let's just sit still. Let's be still in the presence of God. and just allow your thoughts to begin to process and maybe land on one or two things that have been said this morning that you want to just take away and deepen your exploration of. So, Lord, our prayer at this point of this year as we start a new year together is, Lord Jesus, would you form us into a kingdom people? Would you help to continue to shape our culture? Would you heal our relationships that need healing? Would you teach us to live your way together? And Lord, may our shared life point others to the Father and to the love of God.